You are listening to the Adapt Performance podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode.
Yes, guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking through training twice a day, double training days, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it, right? This has come about because I put up a story yesterday about my double training days and generally, some of the struggles of it and that type of thing. I had loads of questions and, honestly, I got asked the same question word for word 3 times, and it was how to best manage double training days. And then there's also a little bit of detail on the end of each one. So what I wanted to do is, instead of trying to, outline this in a 60-second reel, let me give you a podcast episode on it, where I'm just going to generally talk around how I think about managing double training days, give you enough context where hopefully you can think about these things and how it applies to you. And then we'll kind of, see where we go. So yeah, I'm going to riff on this a little bit. I've written a couple of notes just to keep me on track, but generally speaking, I will go off script. So yeah, look, managing double training days is one of those things that a lot of elite athletes and pro athletes have probably done for the dawn of time. Okay, they've done it for forever. But nowadays, I feel like the standard of training and the standard of like amateur athletes that are trying to get to pro is increasing a lot more. You've now got, serious hobbyists that, are really trying to improve their performance super quick. You've got people that love training, so want to train as much as possible, and now are looking to 2-a-days. Potentially, you've got big competitions and big goals, all those. So it's common that people are actually like doing this. And it's one of those things where there are probably some do's and some don'ts associated with it. But I want us to actually think of it less as like a right and a wrong, because when we start doing double training days, you're always going to be impacting the next session in some way, shape, or form. So it's more of a battle of compromises. What are you willing to compromise on for the next thing? So less of a right and wrong, and a little bit more of more ideal and less ideal. Think of it as a continuum. On one side of things, you've got like more ideal. On the other side, you've got less ideal, but there's going to be loads of like mini pit stops along the way. And you just choosing where you kind of sit on that is going to be better. So look, when we get into this then, I'm going to chat through a little bit on the physiology, like the sciencey stuff. I'm going to chat through fatigue in general. I'm going to chat through nutrition and a little bit of some practicalities of like weekly schedule. So I've done double training on and off my whole life since I've been training. So, when I was a young boy, when I just started MMA, so I would have been 15, we used to do the skill session in the evening. We'd then walk to Pure Gym, and then we'd hit a little bit of bodybuilding stuff straight after. Throughout COVID, I did double training days of a Mike Israetel kind of hypertrophy program, which was basically like chest and tris on one day. I know, how dare I? We do chest and tris. I do it in the morning. That was it. I'd do strength in the morning, chest and tris. And then in the evening, I would do chest and tris, but I would do more fatigue, pushing to failure, pump work. Okay. Which was really good, actually. Like I enjoyed it. What I found is I got a lot sorer than usual. And I also fell off a cliff a lot quicker than I would have. And I think that's because you can go a lot harder in each session, because each session is shorter. So you're a lot more amped for it. You'll go in, you'll attack it. But as a result, I think because you're consistently like pushing hard, you're pushing harder than I usually would if I was to do that in one session. Like the actual fatigue I felt was a lot higher. So yeah, I needed to deload quicker. So yeah, interesting. What have I done more recently? And now I'm trying to be a little bit of a hobbyist athlete in jiu-jitsu. I will do skill training and then lift, or do skill training and then cardio or conditioning. And sometimes it's the other way around, right? Based on life. So there's a few things that I've done in my this was one as well. I've done triple training days. So when I did an internship at Peptide in Malibu, California, so I did 6 weeks out there working with the D1 basketball program, and they had some other sports that I assisted with as well. The guy who I was interning under was a bit of a psycho for training. So it was like a fucking training camp for me, to be honest. But yeah, 3-a-days was good. So it would be, we lifted 3 times a day because he was a meathead, a little bit like me as well at the time. So that was difficult. But you know what? A 5-week block, I felt like I came back one, a little bit injured, let's be honest, but I came back in really good shape for me as well. And, give me 2 weeks after I got back and I was probably in the shape of my life. I was lifting heavy, lifting strong. I had great conditioning. I could just chew up volume. But anyway, so there we go. When it comes to training twice a day, then look, there are a lot of people that might have this in their mind, and some people are forced into it through lifestyle and logistics. Like if you work a shift pattern, 4 on 4 off, 7 on 7 off, whatever, and when you're on shift you're not able to really train or get to class timetables and stuff like that. When you're off shift, you need to kind of get done what you can get done. Is it ideal in a real world? Probably not, but so what? We need to get shit done. So that is where you might have to do your skill sessions and then follow it up with some S&C work afterwards. Cool. With your appearance, sometimes you got to kind of, what's the saying? I'm going to butcher it here. Make hay while the sun shines. You just got to do it when you can get it done. Or if you are somebody, a mixed martial artist or a rugby player that's really trying to push that next level and you've got a lot of skill work alongside a lot of conditioning and strength work you need to accomplish, then you just got to get it done when you get it done, right? So let me talk you through some of the physiological sides of, double training days and what the science currently says about this. So there is the idea of the interference effect. Okay, you might have heard me talk about this in the past, and if you have, then apologies that I'm going to be repeating myself. But the interference effect essentially speaks to the idea that it is difficult for you to build good levels of strength and power at the same time as good levels of conditioning. Okay. And one of the ways they used to explain it was it's a little bit like a light switch. Okay. So when the muscle building or strength building signaling pathway in your brain and in your body is turned on, which we call mTOR. So when the mTOR is switched on, muscle building pathway, the conditioning pathway is turned off, which is called AMPK. Okay. And it used to be when one is on, the other's off. Okay. Light switch. And is it still that way? Look, what I will say before we kind of get into this is what we currently know about science is probably not what we're going to know about science in 10 years. It's always developing, and every other day people are disproving a previous theory. Okay, that is kind of how it works. But to my knowledge, currently where it sits is it's not so much of a light switch on off. It's more of a what do you call it? What are those posh light switches? I've never had one. I've seen them on TV. Like the dimmers, right? Little twisties. Yeah, I think it's just a dimmer light switch. We'll go with that. If somebody knows what they're actually called, let me know, because apparently I'm too poor to experience one. Yeah, it's a little twisty. So it dims the light on, it dims it off. So it's not on or off until it actually is fully on or fully off, but you get a percentage of the adaptations. So, which I think makes a lot more sense, okay? So that's essentially what the interference or concurrent training speaks to is that, right? So if we think of that as like our governing principle of when you're building muscle, you're probably not building as much conditioning and vice versa. We need to figure out a way of tackling this, okay? And one of the ways is having a good strategy behind how you do double training days. One of the things is timing, right? So if we think about probably the best way of doing it is to split the session up as much as possible. So in the morning, do your strength or your power, and in the evening, do your conditioning. Perfect. You've got 8 hours in between each one, so you can let the muscle building pathway work its magic, work the recovery. You've then got 8 hours worth of, consolidating those adaptations before you almost shift focus a little bit to more conditioning, and then you'll have an element of probably sleeping through the night where conditioning is the focus. So it's the stimulus is important of like how fresh you are going into that session. However, it is also what you might call the tail of the session. Okay, the tail is where the recovery happens and where the adaptation is going to happen. So that'd be my first thing to say. If you are having to train strength and power and conditioning in the same day across 2 training sessions, I wouldn't do power, strength, and conditioning in one session and then do power, strength, and conditioning in the second session as well. I wouldn't do that. I would split them up, try and pair them, AMPK and mTOR, split them up. Between 4 to 8 hours, honestly, longer is probably better, if you have the opportunity to do so. Obviously, if you do not have the opportunity to do so, just do your best. That's fine. So that is one of the governing principles you want to think about there is like, okay, interference effect. How can I best manage this? Which order should you do it in? This is a really good question. And, I think we could probably go back and forth on this quite a while. The first thing to consider is like, where do you feel like you're going to do your best work? Where are you going to be able to go into that session and absolutely smash it, right? For me, I'm probably going to do a better job of getting 2 good sessions in where I do strength and power in the morning and then I do conditioning in the evening. I think I'll probably do a decent effort on both. If I was to do conditioning in the morning and then go into doing strength and power in the evening, I'm probably going to be a little bit down on that session. So I feel like when we think about the averages, I'm probably personally, this isn't for everybody, this is genuinely just my own thing, I'm probably better that way. However, yesterday when I had to do this, I did conditioning and we had open mat, fighting for my life.
Yes, guys, what is going on? Quick break in today's episode for me to remind you about ADAPT's online strength and conditioning coaching. Our mission really is to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. And our service does exactly that. So you get access to everything: an elite level coach, physiotherapist, psychologist, nutritionist, a community to keep you engaged. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is give you everything you would ever need in order for you to achieve your goals. So if that is something that you are curious about, get in contact and we'll just have a no pressure chat where I explain everything, find out a little bit more about you, and we can decide whether you are a good fit for our program. Okay, without further ado, let's get back into the episode. Cheers.
And then 2 hours later, I had to go and lift. Okay. And I did an okay job. It wasn't my best performances in the world, but it was good enough to probably get a bit better. Right. So, you've got that to think about. And look, when I program this for athletes, right, generally speaking, what we're trying to operate around is the fixed schedule of their sport, right? Whether it is they always train in the morning as part of MMA, right? Whether it's jiu-jitsu, striking, whatever, whether it's always a 9 a.m. session, I'm always having to work around that. Okay. So if I have to do conditioning in the evening or power, it is what it is. You just got to get shit done when you get shit done. So yeah, there we are. The next thing to kind of think about is fatigue. And I kind of touched on this a second ago, right? Fatigue is going to be a part of it. And we're not only bothered about the recovery off the back end, we're bothered about what you can actually sustain for long term. What can you give your best effort with? And this is where people are going to have a little bit of a brain fart with it, because you're going to hear about double training. You're like, okay, I want to train twice a day. I'm going to go hard. You're going to fall off a cliff quick. Charles Poliquin used to speak about gradually building up sessions over years, right? So don't go from training 3 times a week to suddenly you're going to do double days, 5 days a week, because the volume increase is absolutely massive. You need to be careful about this from, a central fatigue standpoint. So central fatigue, speaking to, your brain's ability to actually turn everything on, okay? Like get the motor units fully recruited, and you'll feel when you're centrally fatigued because you just feel tired. This is like peripherally fatigue, like the muscle fatigue, being like, well, my muscles are a little bit sore, a little bit tired in that type of sense, okay? You can feel a bit of DOMS potentially. So fatigue is something you need to consider when you're considering doing double training days. The way I would think about this is you can use some of the modern tech, right? You can use Whoop bands, you can use Garmin's to give you a little bit of a rough idea of, what your heart rate variability and all those things are doing. I don't really use them that much. I use subjective wellness questionnaires more than anything, like literally just kind of rank yourself. How am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? Okay. That could be sleep, muscle soreness, your ability to get going, your stress levels, all those things. And you just have a little bit of an honest conversation with yourself of like, okay, going into this session, this is how I feel. That might spark alarm bells. It might not, right? Once you get into the session and you start warming up, you're going to have a better idea of how you feel. So don't write yourself off straight away, because that's probably one of my biggest bugbears. Get in there, give it a go, and then make the decision. Because sometimes how you feel is a lie. Oftentimes how you feel is a lie. I've had some PBs when I've been, up shit creek and felt terrible. And then I've also had some terrible sessions where I go into the session feeling absolutely hyped. So it's one of those things that you're going to have to think about. But fatigue, there's a few options. So you've got the objective stuff, like I said, Whoop, all that, and then you've got subjective stuff, which I probably value a lot more because I don't think it writes off your session quite as much. The other thing to start thinking about is nutrition, right? So nutrition is going to play a big part in your ability to be able to sustain 2-a-days for a long period of time. And I keep coming back to this idea of, look, you want to be able to sustain what we're going into. And it's no easy feat to be able to just get up and crank out 2-a-days often, okay? It does get on top of you. And ultimately, you just have less time in the day, right? To do other stuff, to do human being stuff like meal prep and clean the house. And, if you've got kids, work, work with the kids, play with the kids, and then do your work and stuff like that. So you're actually just chewing into time. Nutrition's one of those things that people really struggle with anyway. So when you do 2-a-days, it needs to be double. You need to really kind of dial in on it, because not only are you kind of playing with fire with your body now, but you've actually just got less time to prepare. So some of the loose recommendations I would give you is, after that first session, you want to make sure that you do fuel adequately, particularly if you're giving yourself 4 to 8 hours. You've got time to digest it, right? So you want to make sure you get a big helping of carbs. You definitely want to get some protein in there just to help with the muscle growth and repair straight away. You want to make sure you're staying fully hydrated consistently through that time. And you also want to make sure, personally, providing that, it's not too late in the day when you get that second session in, I would probably get a good hit of caffeine in, all right? A coffee, a Monster, caffeine tabs, whatever works for you. But I think that second session sometimes can be a little bit of a slog to get going. So I'd recommend that you kind of jump in there and get yourself nice and hyped. Get Creed on, get Taylor Swift on, whatever the thing is. But that's what I'd recommend. Okay. It's super important, and people overlook nutrition, but nutrition is so valuable in this scenario. It's valuable in so many scenarios, and I feel like if you could lock that in for a majority of people, I feel like you'd see people's results like double, genuinely, because I feel like people get it so wrong. And I'm including that as well. Like, my nutrition's not amazing sometimes. Sometimes I feel like it's decent, but it just takes work, and, it comes back to caveman times. I feel like, I think we've all got a little bit of a, it's genetic. It's kind of baked into us, a little bit of like survival. And I think our relationship with food sometimes isn't always optimal for performance, if I'm being truthful. So what I want to do then is kind of wrap this up soon, but just give you like my honest take on this. Like, all the sports science and all the S&C in the world is fantastic, right? It's consistently giving you different frameworks and different, rationales of how to go about doing this and doing that, different adaptations, whatever, right? I'm all about that. That's my bread and butter. This is what I do for a job, okay? I'm a big fan of it. I love reading about it. It's the dream, okay? But ultimately, sometimes you've just got to go and get it, right? You've just got to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. And don't talk yourself out of doing stuff sometimes. And that's my biggest annoyance, is when we start thinking about recovery frameworks and fatigue management, I just think it just creates softness, to be fair. Like, training's meant to be hard. If you're actually trying to change stuff, it's meant to be difficult. And I wouldn't talk yourself out of doing it sometimes. So all that to say, I've spoken about fatigue, and that type of thing. Just, if you need to go straight from your skill session and do a lift, do a lift. What some of the practicalities of how I actually go about doing that, then let's get into that, is I'm usually, so do a little bit of my story then. So I've always kind of strength trained, right? So decently strong, got a bit of muscle, that type of scenario. I've been reducing my volume down from 3 or 4 sets to 2 sets since I've started jiu-jitsu, and I'm managing well, making good progress, getting stronger, love it. So my volume's pretty low in general, but I lift heavy and I lift pretty hard on those sessions, okay? I get after it. When I do a lifting session directly after a skill session, I don't drop my volume anymore. I'm not going to go to 1 set. I just keep it at 2 sets. But for you guys that are usually doing 3 or 4 sets, drop it to 2 sets, okay? Just bring it down a little bit, up the intensity, because the intensity is going to be the real factor in you making gains anyway for a majority of people. Like, I think just get after it. So that's something to think about. If you're having to pair them in a short amount of time, maybe reduce the volume of the second session. If you know you've got a heavy sparring session later that evening, but you've got to get your S&C done in the morning, then maybe just take the edge off a little bit, just so you can really prioritize the most important session of the week, which for you guys is sparring. If you are a rugby athlete you've got your Tuesday training in the evening, but you want to get in a morning session, just be skeptical of the fact that they're going to probably run you quite hard in the evening. You're going to do some contact. So if you've got any problem areas, which for a lot of you guys is probably going to be shoulders and hammies, or areas that we're really kind of conscious of, give those areas a little bit of grace. Don't smash the shit out of them. Let them turn up to that session in a good place, just so you're not playing with fire, right? So let me give you a little idea of how we basically go about this. High and low, well, actually, let me speak through high and lows because this is definitely something that people speak about. So the high and low system, when we think about programming, is the idea that you want to try and group as much of your stimuli, your high intensity stimuli, onto one training or one day as possible, so that the next day can be a low intensity day. So then you've got this undulation, this up and down of high days, low days, high days, low days, so that you are not doing high all the time. Because if you do high all the time, one, you might get injured. Two, your highs are probably not actually that high because centrally and your central nervous system's not going to be operating on, like, firing on all cylinders. So high-low days give you an opportunity to stimulate adaptations and then recover and then shift gear. Essentially, a high and low day is a theory of AMPK and mTOR. Okay, you're just flicking between two different things over a week. It doesn't always happen like that. So if you're doing one session a day, it's a lot easier to manage. When you're doing 2 sessions a day, particularly when you've got sport practice, it gets a little bit more difficult. And you end up with this middle ground of some high days, some medium days, some medium to high days, the odd low day. What I would recommend you do is have a little look at your weekly schedule and literally group it up. And I want you to give it a color, right? Literally just give it a color. Like, how hard is that session? Red being killer, amber being medium, and green being, you know what, it's pretty easy. It's some light drilling, or it's like zone 2 cardio. It's fine. You should have a few sessions for sure. You definitely should have some green sessions or sessions where you're completely off in a week. But it should not be red. That is an issue. Okay. And we need to solve that straight away. So high day and low day it works in theory, but in practice, again, going back to what I mentioned before, it's a balance of compromises more than anything. Okay. So I genuinely could speak about this for hours and hours and hours, but the real benefit in this type of topic is us digging into your unique scenario, because life is going to make your mind up for you. Like, if you've got to be somewhere, you've got to be somewhere. So yeah, all that to say, right, if you're embarking on this journey of training twice a day, sick, I'm excited, okay? Take your time with it. Don't go from 0 double training days to 6 double training days. Gradually build it up over the next couple of months. But you might need to reduce the volume in each one of those sessions. So instead of doing a 60-minute session and then going up to 2 60-minute sessions in a day, maybe do 2 45s, just so you're building it up a little bit, all right? So if you've got any questions on today's podcast, give me a shout. If you are looking for an S&C coach to help you with this, then get in touch. Like, I speak about the value of coaching, one as an actual training tool, but also as an education tool. Because off the back of working with a good S&C coach and getting out some good schedules that work for you, some good training that works for you, off the back of it, you'll just be so much better as an athlete because you've got a solid foundation of education, but also of training, right? So if you're in the market and you want us to kind of take care of this stuff, give us a shout at Adapt. This is what we do day in, day out. Is what we live for, and we get some great results with our athletes. So have a look through our website. I'll put the website in the show notes below.
Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.